Author's note. This is my first book. You'll likely find a few mistakes here and there until I can catch them all. Sorry. I have read over 1,000,000 words editing this book, and I did my best, but I'm sure I've missed something. If you find an issue in the book, feel free to let me know so I can improve the quality of this work. Other than that, please enjoy your time with the travelers. Yours happily, Jordan Townsend. Forward. To Luke, Logan, and Aurora, may your days be long and happy, and your rainy nights warm and content within your parents' embrace. Love, your Uncle Jordan. Mistlehop and the Festival. It was raining, a hard, bitterly cold rain. Rowan, a brown field mouse, pulled his dark purple cowl around him and gritted his teeth as the wind whipped around him. The mouse moved down the dark pathway, his torchlight guiding his footfalls. Faintly in the distance, he could see a row of lights marching against the darkness. Finally, he thought to himself, almost there. Coming in the opposite direction was a small shape carrying a gas lamp. The form would pause every few hundred feet, then the light would swing upward and hold its position for a while until the small flame flickered, grew, and separated, and the first light swung downward again. The small flame then moved closer, repeating the pattern again, lighting the way to his night's destination. They moved quickly towards one another despite the weather. As they passed in the rain, Rowan offered hello and thanks that were caught in his throat by the wind. He flashed a smile regardless. The small patron, a female mouse bundled in a dark green rain slicker and poncho, turned beige by the orange flame's light, smiled at Rowan and passed on, wanting to finish her job as quickly as possible to get. The tavern was large for such a small community, such as Mistlehop, and built into the trunk of a huge oak tree, with windows cut out along the length of the trunk's bark upwards until it reached the leafy branches at the top of the tree. It was the cultural center of the town, and most often the place for town discourse and problem-solving, as well as many of the town meetings during times of strife and prosperity alike. The door was thickly reinforced with woven roots from the tree against cold winters, and protected the inhabitants well from stormy nights such as this. There were fireplaces around the perimeter of the building whose hearths radiated the heat throughout its center and up through the floors to the many rooms above. The building felt cozy, even though the main room could hold well over 100 if need be. In the center of the room a stage, usually surrounded on 3 sides with tables and booths, with the entrance to the kitchen and stairs above it rested. The table and chairs were pushed to the edges of the room, circling around the stage, and this is where the parents sat drinking and eating quietly. In the center of the room, blankets and pillows had been laid out before the stage, and most were occupied by small mice and the occasional young badger, otter, frogling, and fox cub. On the stage, an old mouse sat with a large book in his lap, with a warm mug of acorn mead sitting next to him, which he drank from occasionally as he spoke. "Watch for the tin fox if you dare. He'll trap you, friend, and take you there. A small dark cage will be the last thing you see before the cage opens, and your end it'll be. So beware the tin fox, a warrior of old. If you hear the tick-thump of his can, steady your heart and let your bravery take hold, and hide yourself away from this fox, or run away, if you even can, because if he finds you, you'll not escape. So run and hide. It's your life that's at stake." The 3 mice in the front row, 2 boys and a girl, gasped and hid under their shared blanket, as did the other children around them, those that weren't already safely asleep. A few of the adults chuckled mildly, remembering the time they had sat there as youth and heard the same story and had done similarly. The older mouse on the stage, Father Jedediah, read on as the door opened and Rowan stepped in. He forced the door shut quickly and quietly behind him and hung up his cloak on the vast line of hooks next to the door, the night's rain dripping onto the stone floor to dry quietly. He rolled his torch sconce into the ash pit by the door and let its embers smolder and cool, smoking gently next to others left by those that had already arrived. He scanned the room, and after finding the badger he came to see, moved to the edge of the room to meet his old friend. He found him and his family watching the stage, and holding a mug of mead between his massive paws. His wife sat next to him with a baby nuzzled sleepily against her. Its faint snores rose from beneath its downturned face, pressed into his mother. Rowan sat down at the booth next to her. "Good story tonight?" asked Rowan. "Better now that you're here," said Blake, regarding Rowan with cheerful eyes. "You look half drowned, though." A smile raised the corner of his lips. "Just a bit damp around the edges is all," scoffed Rowan. "I saw Millie lighting the path lamps, though I don't know if she recognized me through the blasted rain. She seemed much more focused on getting the pathway lit more than anything. Yes, I don't think there's much to do other than get the job done as quickly as possible on a night like tonight," said Blake, looking out the nearest window as the rain lashed against it, falling in rivulets down each pane. "So where's your boy?" asked Rowan, looking out into the crowd. The badger lifted one great paw and pointed to the large shape to the left of the three mice in the front. His rhythmic breathing suggested that he was asleep. "Looks like the story is a bit dull for him," said Blake, laughing to himself. He took another swig of his mead. "He may be getting a bit old for Jedediah's stories, I think." Rowan thought so too, but didn't say anything. "How's the cub doing?" asked Rowan, turning his attention to the female badger. "Good, good," said Lizzie. "Nothing wrong with him at all, except he snores a bit louder than you'd expect." The cub hiccuped, and then the snores continued, as though he could tell he was being talked about. The three of them laughed lightly, Lizzie nuzzling gently against him, and continued with their discussion. They spoke quietly while Jedediah finished his story, and the last of the younglings calmed down as he moved from the tale of the tin fox to the brave retelling of Marlin, the mouse that defeated him in battle a century ago, and how she and her friends came to this town and found this tree, decided it would make a good place for all good-natured animal folk to settle, if they so desired, and began to build this very tavern they were all sitting in. It calmed the young ones and brought a sense of pride to the older folks centered around them. By the end of the stories, a series of snores and dreams were all that came from the center of the floor before the stage. Jedediah closed the book and finished his mead. He looked out over the crowd and smiled before leaving the stage. "Do you think they'll be ready for the festival?" asked Rowan. Blake lowered his mug again and looked at him. "I think so. We won't know until we get there really, though, but I think so." The three of them looked at the animals lying in the crowd, all asleep soundly against the storming night, and then Blake and Lizzie looked at their son and smiled. The next day was the beginning of the festival preparations. The rain had turned most of the main field of the festival where it would be held to a muddy bog, so they had had to wait until it dried 3 days later to actually begin preparations. But there was plenty to be made and organized in the meantime. The town was abuzz with prepping for the festivities. It was the main festival of the year, just after the last storm had passed, and the spring finally turned into summer. It was also a major event in the younglings' lives, as they were brought up a year in school or sent off for their travels to learn about their land as best they could. This year it was the small mice's turn to be brought up a grade, and the time for Barkley and Blake and Lizzie's child to be brought along to go on his travels abroad, along with his schoolmates and friends as well. They had reached the age between childhood and adulthood, and had to make an effort to go Threed Mountain and see the elder tree where Merlin's tomb was encased. It was not too hard of a journey, but long enough to give the children a sense of self that was sorely needed as an adult. It proved to the community that those that made the journey were worthy of being a part of the town, and when they returned, there was a party to be had, as the community as a whole had grown by however many returned from the adventure. For Rose, that time couldn't come soon enough. "Why do we have to wait 3 more days for the festival if we're ready to go now?" Rose asked her mother, who was busy baking scores of loaves of honey nut bread for the festival. "Because it has to be done right. And you want to be part of the community, don't you?" replied her mother, Janice. "Of course I do. But why couldn't we just hold it in the Deep Root Tavern? I've heard they held them there once or twice before in the past," said Rose. "Only in times of emergencies, or if some great call was going out across the land that required the adults to allow their children early entry into the community," replied Janice. She kneaded the 40th bit of dough into a ball and swirled off the edge to give it an even way to rise in the oven, and placed it next to the preceding batches of dough from earlier in the morning to prove. "Thankfully that's not happening now, and you'll just have to wait until it's your turn. I only have a few more days until then, and in the meantime you can help me with this dough," handing Rose an apron and pointing towards the work in front of her. Rose huffed as she placed the apron around her neck and tied it behind her. "All right, but I can't wait for this to happen. I've been waiting years for my chance to go to Marlin's tomb, and I plan to put my name down next to hers as quickly as possible and get on with my adventures." "Oh, aye," Janice said. "The marvelous adventures across the lands and seas that await such a brave young mouse as you." She smiled kindly at the young mouse. "But first, let's get this done, shall we? Much to do until then." They spent the rest of the morning and all the way through to the evening kneading dough. It was Janice's reasoning that one can never have too much honey nut bread at a festival. In the courtyard of the square, to the northeast of the Deep Root Tavern, Samuel carried wood for the fire of the kiln at which his father worked. A blacksmith by trade, and a good one at that, they were in much demand for the year, even if the work was hard and dangerous more often than not. It had made Samuel strong and resilient to heat, which for an otter was something of a rarity. They tended not to like the heat, preferring a lake or stream to swim in, but Samuel relished it. He knew that every time something went into the fire, something new and wonderful came out of it, something better, sharper, or stronger than went into it. He was accustomed to it. He wasn't worried about the trip to Marlin's tomb, because he knew that when he got back, the work that he had left would still be waiting for him at the anvil, and it comforted him. He brought the wood to the kiln, stacked it beside it to dry, and threw in a few more sticks that had been drying for a few days into the mouth of the furnace. It ate them greedily. Are you ready for your trip? Asked his father Marco, as he bent over the forge and drew out the length of chain he was preparing to shape in a hammer. Yes, I don't think it would be that difficult, said Samuel. Oh, I don't know, said Marco. You'd be surprised what can happen on those trips. I met your mother on ours, you know. Yes, I know that. You keep reminding me, said Samuel. I know. It's a great love story, that one, replied Marco, laughing to himself. What will you do when you get back from your naming ceremony? Asked Marco. Well, I figured I would come back to the forge and work with you until I could find my own pretty lady, said Samuel. Aye, that's a fine thing to do, replied Marco. They kept working until late in the evening. There was much to be done to be ready for the festival, and they were the only town's blacksmiths. So it fell on them to get a majority of the supplies for the trip made for the young folk. Every animal on the journey got a weapon, a sack with supplies fitted for their body type, and enough food and water to complete the trail. They were also given a rock with their name on it, and each time one of them made it to the tomb, they were to wash their rock in the stream by the tomb and place it next to the hundreds of others that surrounded them on the riverbank, so that they could say thanks to Marlin for her acts, and so the exercise was complete, and they could become part of the community as a whole. If they lost or broke their stone beforehand, they weren't allowed to become part of it. Somehow Jedediah always knew when someone lost their stone beforehand, and they had to wait a year to try again before it being accepted. It happened very rarely, but on occasions a few of those that didn't take the trip seriously didn't make it back as adults, but stayed on as children for another year, much to their families' embarrassment. They often didn't repeat their mistake, though, as no one made light of the situation at their expense once they had transitioned. It was a child's mistake after all. This took 3 hours to make. It's only 10 minutes long. So I'm going to break it into chunks and do as best as I can. But it has taught me to improve my reading drastically. And it makes editing easier using GarageBand on the iPad. So here's to improving both books on the podcast. Tomorrow will be Divergent Mind. The next day will be this. And I'll switch back and forth until I get bored. I may focus more on the other one. I may focus more on this one. It's just until I feel ready to do whatever I really want, you know? As it is. Have a lovely day. Hope you enjoyed it. More to come. Tons more to come. Thanks for listening so much. Please visit anchor.fm/divergentmind to leave a message so that I may get back to you. Thank you. Have a nice day.